Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa left Thursday night's 31-10 loss to the Buffalo Bills after suffering a concussion, the third diagnosed concussion of his NFL career. Late in the third quarter, Tagovailoa scrambled up the middle for a first down and lowered his shoulder to initiate contact with Bills safety Damar Hamlin. Tagovailoa's helmet made hard contact with Hamlin's body, and the quarterback immediately went into a fencing response with his arms in an unnatural position. Dolphins medical trainers attended to him for several minutes as players knelt around him. He was ultimately able to walk off the field under his own power and into the team's locker room. He was quickly ruled out for the game. Tagovailoa was the subject of widespread attention in 2022, when he hit the back of his head on the ground in a game against the Bills. He stumbled on his way back to the Dolphins huddle and briefly left the game before returning from what was described as a back injury. The NFL and NFLPA opened a joint investigation into how Tagovailoa was handled, leading to the NFLPA exercising its right to fire the unaffiliated neurological consultant who cleared Tagovailoa to return to the game. The NFL also altered its concussion policy to include an ataxia clause, allowing a spotter to have players removed from the game if they show certain concussion symptoms. 4 days later, Tagovailoa hit the back of his head on the ground in similar fashion during a game against the Cincinnati Bengals and was briefly rendered unconscious. He was taken to a local hospital and diagnosed with a concussion. Afterward, coach Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins drew heavy criticism for allowing him to play. Tagovailoa sat out 2 games before returning to the field but suffered another concussion during a December 25 game against the Green Bay Packers. This time, the Dolphins shut him down for the rest of the season. Tagovailoa said he briefly considered retirement after the 2022 season after conversations with his family. During an interview with The Dan Le Batard Show, he clarified that his mother asked him to consider retiring. He decided against it and spent the offseason bulking up and training in jiu-jitsu to learn how to fall without hitting his head on the ground. The training worked. He played all 17 regular season games in 2023 and the Dolphins' playoff loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. This offseason, he signed a 4-year, $212.1 million contract extension, making him the highest-paid player in franchise history. Third-year quarterback Skylar Thompson entered the game in place of Tagovailoa with Miami trailing 31-10. Shorthanded Bills defense turns in a gutsy effort. With cornerback Taron Johnson out, linebacker Matt Milano still missing and Terrell Bernard pectoral knocked out after the second series, it looked dicey for the Bills handling a dangerous Miami offense, not to mention it being a hot, steamy night, a supposed edge for the home team. But the Bills turned in a tremendous effort, intercepting Tua Tagovailoa 3 times and stopping them thrice more on 4th downs. It was a group effort, too. Cam Lewis, Johnson's replacement, was picked on twice early but rallied to have a strong game. Jamarcus Ingram had his biggest NFL game, with his first 2 career picks, including a pick 6. Dorian Williams had a 3rd down stuff, followed by an Ed Oliver sack on 4th down to snuff out another Dolphins drive. But the brilliance of Buffalo's execution was in forcing the ball away from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. All 3 of Tagovailoa's picks came targeting other receivers. When Tagovailoa left the game with a concussion, Hill and Waddle had combined for 7 catches for 65 yards. After a bit of a slow start last week, Sean McDermott's and Bobby Babbitt's shorthanded but gutsy defense has cleaned things up quite nicely. Dolphins offense struggles before Tua Tagovailoa leaves with concussion. Tua Tagovailoa left the game late in the third quarter with a concussion, suffering through a rough game prior to that. It was the third 3-int game of Tagovailoa's career, with the final pick run back 31 yards for a touchdown and a 31-10 Buffalo lead. His wide receivers Grant Dubose and Robbie Chosen arguably were at least partially to blame on the first 2 picks, but Tua's pick 6 was a poor throw against heavy pressure. The Dolphins lost offensive tackle Teron Armstead and left guard Robert Jones mid-game, but the Dolphins' offense was too up and down prior to them leaving. Penalties and a 4th down stop killed momentum multiple times. Even Mike McDaniel's play calling seemed strangely off at times. Running back Devon Achane ankle was a game-time decision, but he ended up with a career-high 29 touches, his previous high was 22. Akane was terrific, really the only player on offense who stood out. But why was he out there? Well into the fourth quarter, with most other starters out of the game. There was a fair amount of pressure on Tagovailoa entering the game, and it was yet another disappointing result for him and the Dolphins against the Bills, but the big question now is with Tua's health given his concussion history.